Live and Let Die sees Agent 007 investigating the deaths of 3 men who are connected with the government, whether they're agents or people in the United Nations or whatever. These deaths lead to a gangster, big-time gangster known as Mr. Big, who essentially runs Harlem. It turns out that Mr. Big is actually a alter ego of another man called Kananga. This man is a political leader of a small island, and he's using this persona of Mr. Big to basically bring drugs into the city. So essentially that's it. It's just a drug trafficking scheme. Bond gets caught up in a drug trafficking scheme. There's no big kind of outer space adventures or volcanoes or any of that kind of stuff that we've come to expect from Bond with regards to plot. However, that stuff is still there, which is rather odd, I think, because this type of villain doesn't necessarily suit the outlandish underground lairs and the things that would require ridiculous amounts of money to pull off, in the same way that kind of Blofeld could pull off. The real question, of course, is does it work? Well, yes and no. This is somewhere between a good film and a bad film. I can't honestly call Live and Let Die a good film, but on the other hand, it is quite enjoyable in many places. This has to be the least politically correct film I've ever seen from a franchise as big as Bond. It really is quite ridiculous, and it really pushes the boundaries. I also don't think that the film deserves a PG rating. Of course, they didn't have anything higher than that back then other than a 15. It's not quite a 15 rated film, but it's certainly not a PG, I personally feel. There are many dark elements in this film, particularly the voodoo element and some scenes where it looks like there's going to be some sacrifices. But there's also quite a lot of killings in this that are fairly graphic, again, for a PG. When Bond's investigation leads him to Harlem, we're driven through the streets of Harlem only to find that almost every person there, every black person there, is in some way linked to Kananga or Mr. Big. Literally every black person in this film, except for 2 who have very minor roles, are villains. They're all bad guys. Even the CIA agent who's been assigned to Bond, this black woman named Rosie, turns out to be a villain. Now, I first saw this film at a very early age. I'm a middle-class white guy who comes from a middle-class suburb, and I went to a middle-class school that was full of white kids. If I think back, I honestly can't remember one single black kid at my primary school, and I saw this at a primary school age, so most of my views at that age were shaped by a film like this. So weigh that up a bit and you can kind of understand why some crazy white kids have weird ideas about black people. But obviously I grow up, I mature, I figure things out, and I realise that, you know, this is just a film with many stereotypes. But it's staggering just how much racism really they get away with here. There's a line in this film when Felix Leiter is given some information by Bond on a car, and he doesn't run a trace on the license plate. He says, run a trace on a white pimpmobile. How would you even find that car based on that description? Of course, they try to balance all this out by having crazy white characters such as Clifton James's J.W. Pepper, who I must say has to be one of the most annoying... No, I'll correct that. He is the most annoying character throughout the entire Bond franchise. He's basically a Southern American hick stereotype. Again, like I say, he's there to counterbalance all this stereotypical black people that we have from that era, from the 70s era. They're all either pimps or gangsters. Either way, all kind of leaves a real bad taste in the mouth. The story for this film isn't actually that bad. Mr. Big or Kananga or whatever you want to call him's plot is actually quite a good one. It's an entertaining one, and I really like Yaphet Kotto as the villain. I actually think he's my favourite villain up to this point in the series, and he also comes with his own henchman, who just happens to be my favourite henchman in the series up to this point as well. So that kind of double team, that tag team of Kananga and Teehee are really great in the villain department. It's one of the strongest aspects of this film. The film probably does try to give us too many villains, however, because we have Baron Samedi as well, and we have Whisper, Mr. Whisper, and Baron Samedi's quite creepy, to be honest. I've always found him creepy, and as a child watching this film I never really understood the scenes with him in, because he's like the scene when he's shot in the head and his body kind of explodes and then he comes back up again and then he gets killed by the snakes and then he returns at the end. It's all just very confusing really from a child's standpoint. It's a little bit too mature, I think. It's asking a lot from children to get on board with this, and just the whole voodoo element that comes with his character again is a bit too dark for my taste. The women in this film, as is often typical of the Bond franchise, are also pretty weak. Beyond looking fairly attractive, they don't really serve much of a purpose. They're just really there for Bond as sex fodder, really. There are a few plot inconsistencies as well that just kind of nag at me while I'm watching them. For example, when Agent Rosie is killed by one of the scarecrows, which again are rather creepy, I must say, for a PG, but when Bond is later walking through the fields and those same scarecrows are looking at him, rather than using them to kill him, they go after him with a helicopter, and it just doesn't make sense. It's inconsistent. However, as I said, there are a lot of elements to this film that I did enjoy as well. There are some good action sequences to balance out the bad. There's a particularly good boat chase sequence, and while it is kind of broken up with all the Sheriff Pepper stuff, which is really annoying, it does have good elements too. There's a really good explosion when Bond dispatches one of Kananga's henchmen. There's also a really good fight scene on the train at the end with Bond and Tee-Hee. Again, I think this is kind of mirroring the fight sequence between Bond and Red Grant in From Russia with Love. That fight sequence was probably shot and edited a little better. It had a lot more intensity to it, but this one has a bit more fun to it, I think. This fight sequence is a bit more fun than the one in From Russia with Love. Another element to this film, which I think is the best in the series so far, is the opening title song. I'm not a big Beatles fan. Anyone who knows me knows that. I'm particularly not a big fan of Paul McCartney, but however, I do think this song that he did for Live and Let Die is fantastic. It is certainly going to be in my top 5 Bond themes of all time if I ever do that list. The title sequence itself that goes with that song is also very good. A lot of the images are really, there's a certain kind of vulgarity to them, but in a way that just, I don't know, it gets a response from me. It antagonises me in a way, I guess, that some of the previous opening title sequences didn't, just because of its imagery. There are some real good standout stunts in the film as well, like the one when Bond hops across the mouths of the crocodiles. It's a really good stunt, obviously not done by Roger Moore, but in that scene, when Moore is playing up against the guy who plays Tee-Hee, you see a genuine nervousness on Moore's face, and I don't know what went on behind the scenes on the film, but certainly when they were surrounded by all these crocodiles, whether Moore is just that good of an actor, which I don't think he is, he genuinely looks nervous, and I do like that scene as a whole. The whole scene plays out really well. I like the interplay between Bond and Tee-Hee. So there you go. Like I said, it's not a standout in the series by any means, but it's certainly not the worst either. It's very entertaining in many ways, but I can't quite bring myself to call it a good film, and that's why I'm going to give this a 5.5 out of 10. So there you go, there's my review of Live and Let Die. In my last review, when I did Diamonds Are Forever, I ran a little competition, and I just want to announce the winner of that was Fear the KM Gamer 19. Check out his channel, because I actually watch some of the videos he does. He's really good. So he won the Trouble with the Curve Ultraviolet. So well done on that one. But yeah, other than that, what did you think of Live and Let Die? Do you think I was being too harsh, or do you think my criticisms of the film were correct? Comment below, let me know, and until next time, thank you for watching. Yeah, particularly 2 of them are very strong, and the other 2 maybe not necessarily. This has to be the least politically